Okay, everyone, roll for initiative. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, with special guests Liam, Tim, and Marie. This is the podcast where all five of us went and saw a movie at our local Regal cinema, and now we're going to talk about it in Matt's Honda Pilot right after the movie, give our gut reactions, and try to answer such questions as, should you see this movie? Should you not see this movie? Should you wait for streaming? Should you miss it altogether? Should you get snacks? Should you plan a bathroom break? We try to get down to the nitty-gritty of all of that, but make no promises. I am Todd Domer.
And I'm Matt Malloy, and yes, welcome to another episode. We saw a movie. We'll talk about it. Welcome to all guests. And the movie we saw today is called Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. An epic name.
You nailed it.
For an epic film. Or is it an epic film? Well, we'll talk about that. So, who's in this movie? Hugh Grant is in this movie. Chris Pine is in this movie. Michelle Rodriguez is in this movie. And who else?
I would argue Justice Smith at this point is well known enough. He was the magic kid.
Yes.
He was in Detective Pikachu and the Jurassic Worlds.
Okay. Fair enough. Anyone else?
I wouldn't say
That's
I'm
the main
like celebrity status.
Yeah, celebrity status. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, well, if you like those celebrities, maybe you'll see this movie. What is it about? Well, it's about characters doing things. Much like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, it's wide-ranging, and you have your different types of characters. You've got a bard, if you will, played by Chris Pine. You've got a barbarian/fighter type character played by Michelle Rodriguez. You got some other characters thrown in there. You've got an evil sorceress and a good wizard and what else? A shapeshifter druid type. Yeah.
Tefling, I think she's called.
A tefling.
Tiefling, yes. Something like that.
Gotcha.
The horns.
The horns. And there's a paladin also. And I think those are sort of the classes of characters. You get lots of Dungeons and Dragons monsters and stuff like that. But anyway, the main character is Chris Pine's bard character, who over the course of the movie, we meet him. He's in prison with the barbarian character, and he kind of gives all the backstory, and then they escape from prison, and we find out that he's lost his wife, and their daughter is being taken care of by Hugh Grant's character. And so he's trying to get to her now that he's out of prison and kind of, he wants to revive his dead wife. So he's got to get this magical tablet so he can do that and then get his daughter. And so they go and they find out that Hugh Grant's character, what's his name?
Forge.
His name's Forge. He's become like the king or lord of this city, and so they go into the city and they meet with him, and he tells some lies about the Chris Pine character, and the daughter believes him, and he's been raising her, so they basically get thrown out of the city again. And so they go on a quest that they're going to get back into the city. They're going to break into this vault. They're going to take stuff, and they're going to get this tablet, this magical tablet, and they're going to get the daughter, and they're going to bring down Forge from his lord status. And so they have to go on an epic quest to get all the equipment that they need, and then they go and they attack the city, and that's the ending, is when they win or lose. I won't tell you what happens.
Nice.
But maybe you could guess. Anyway, so yeah. So, Todd, what are your thoughts on Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves?
Well, I'm gonna say this is probably like the best Dungeons and Dragons movie you could make, but I don't think it makes it a good movie. I'm not saying it's like a bad movie, but I think Dungeons and Dragons might be an example of. I don't know if you can adapt that to anything else besides playing a campaign in Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I don't know if it can be adapted to a movie or anything like that. Only because, like, maybe a TV show, because the whole point of playing the Dungeons and Dragons, besides, you know, the fun with friends, is like going through a campaign and like having all these different points in a campaign that you hit. There's the dungeon crawl, there's monster fighting and stuff like that. And to make a movie, it feels like to make it a Dungeons and Dragons movie, you have to like bring all that in. And I felt like this movie suffered from having to do that. There just was so much, and it was like so go go go, so on to the next thing, because that's what it's like playing Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, like, obviously there's a lot more like travel time and different things like that, but and so I just think it made for like a kind of move it along, fast paced movie, but I just don't think it was hitting with me at all times. It was fast paced. Definitely plenty of good things in this movie. I liked a lot of the fight scenes. I liked the special effects at times. I like that a lot of, like, I've only played a little bit of D&D, but I like the class representation of who's there and stuff like that. Wow, some of the beasts and stuff like that. And, you know, it hit those points, and I was like, oh, that's cool. It hit that point. But then it was like, there just wasn't anything like, I don't know. To me, there was nothing real there, because the movie was obscenely jokey, like all the time. And I think they were trying to capture, like, oh, this is what it's like when you're playing this game with your friends. Like, you guys are all joking the whole time, which is probably true for a lot of people who play. It just made for a weird movie to me. Like, it was trying to bring all those things from D&D, and it just felt like too much to me. I don't know if I'm in my kind of in a class of my own thinking that. I'm not sure if everyone super loved it. I didn't hate it. I just felt like it was just like, it was all over the place of what it wanted to do. It was like not a super great kind of just starting point A to finishing point B. But I'll kind of just leave it there. That's kind of how I felt. Gonna have a hard time nailing down a number, but luckily I have 4 more reviews before I have to decide that. So let's go with Marie. How'd you feel about this little D&D crawl?
Well, my disclaimer is that I've never played D&D and I know nothing about the game. So I couldn't comment on any of your points.
Fair.
Related to that.
That's the way I like it. I like to be the one that's really out there.
All right.
The
Well,
wild card,
I always,
if you would.
I tend to be the one who hasn't had any background for these movies. I thought the pacing was good. I expected to not be able to follow things because I hadn't played the game, but I was able to follow the story and the characters, and I didn't get lost in this movie, which I expected to. So that felt like a plus for me. And again, as I've said before, my metric is if you can keep me engaged and I don't get distracted by anything else in my life for 2.5 hours, it's a good movie. And there was only one time where I thought, hey, I haven't thought about anything in my life. So that's only like a half a thought of it. I loved the writing. I thought it was funny. And I thought it was incredibly entertaining for me. And again, I was surprised that I like this movie so much. I enjoyed the character development. I do think there was some good character development, especially Chris Pine's character through it. He made decisions later in the movie that I won't discuss because that's a spoiler, that where he very selfishly went on this quest and in the end did the right thing for the people that he loved, which I thought was good. I like the diversity of the cast. I like the really strong female characters. I thought the special effects were good, and I don't know if the characters in the game are supposed to be funny sometimes, but they really were, and I really just love that dragon. My only the only criticism I would say is maybe this was a scotch too long of a movie. There were probably a couple things that they didn't need to do, but I really enjoyed myself.
Fun fact about the strong female Michelle Rodriguez in this movie is that she purposely grew her armpit hair out to be a barbarian. However, you don't ever see her armpits in this movie.
I did not notice that. I did not notice
I was
that.
trying. I was like the whole movie. I'm like, lift that arm up, Michelle.
But
I was
all
like,
the
show it
women,
off.
But she's
all
also
the
known
wi-
for playing strong female
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
characters quite often.
all the women characters were strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only, like, even a little bit not super strong character was Chris Pine's daughter, but she was a kid and she was essentially being held hostage.
Right. Yeah.
But every other female was strong. And they were all shapes and colors and ethnicities and all of that, which I always enjoy.
Good stuff. Liam, how'd you feel?
I think it was a really good movie. I think it captured the essence of playing D&D well, with having a bunch of wildly different characters where they're not as serious as they should realistically be. But I do think it was kind of D&D light for a mass audience. If you want something that more captures the exactness of playing a D&D campaign, you'll go and want to watch a TV show like Vox Machina or other fantasy TV shows that get that long-form storytelling. But it was funny, it was interesting, the story moved well to different locations, and each location felt distinct, which is something I feel like a lot of fantasy movies have trouble with, is making the world feel big enough by having each place feel different. The only thing I think that really suffers from is that it was really obvious throughout the movie that it was trying to set up a sequel, trying to set up a universe for them to expand more into. I think they leaned a bit too heavily into that. But that's something that is really a problem when you do play D&D, is the DM comes up with this whole world and they try to fit it all into the session, and most D&D sessions never actually reach their end. So in that way it kind of works, but for a movie I think they were trying to do a bit too much lore, a bit too much backstory within the amount of space that they had.
Fair enough. Tim?
Yes, so just like Marie, I have never played Dungeons and Dragons either. I am aware of it due to a lot of my friends are play it and they're into it. So I just went into it saying, I'm just going to watch this fantasy movie and see if I can enjoy this ride, and I will say confidently that I did. The characters, like I said, were unique and different, and a whole mix of people that you wouldn't think would be on a quest together. And yet they all complimented each other, even if they didn't feel like they did at first. And it just, everybody was, where they made mistakes when they needed to. They were funny. They were, kind of ragging on each other, but they were also depending on each other. And like you said, that going to each different world was interesting. There was always something new and different, things I hadn't seen before, or things, there was a lot of creativity in making this movie as far as the creatures they came up with and some of the twists and turns. I mean, are there some fantasy movie tropes in this? Sure, but I feel like it's just a common treaded ground at this point. But this movie, I thought, had enough fun, playful spirit, I would say, to it. And it felt like you were watching people play a game with the way that the characters were interacting, and getting, sometimes even just getting lucky on things as if they rolled a natural 20 out of nowhere. And it was funny. And like I said, the special effects were kind of all over the place in a good way. Like there were some creatures looked really smooth, some didn't. There were some portal effects, there were some other things, and there were just some really neat ideas in there. And it was kind of almost cramming a ton in there just because this world can do that. And for me, it was okay because it was just like, yeah, I'll accept that, yeah. And the story had enough of a wink and a nod to it that you were just like, sure, that makes sense, that's fine. And I think that helped someone like me just go along for the ride because it didn't make me want to think too hard about it. Just like, oh, this is just fun. And yeah, I think Todd, you're right. It was very jokey, but for me, that was a gateway into the world where I feel like if it had taken itself too seriously, I don't think I would have cared. And because all the characters had a kind of, well, that happened, sense of humor to it, it just worked. So for me, I think it's a big thumbs up.
All right, Matt, pressure's on.
Pressure's on.
I'm waiting for someone to slightly agree with me.
Getting higher. Difference is I stay drier. Well, so I haven't played a ton of Dungeons and Dragons, maybe just a couple times in my life, like pen and paper campaign type thing. But I've played a lot of computer role-playing games that are based in like Dungeons and Dragons lore, or that universe, or those monsters, or those spells, or whatever. So I'm very familiar with the world of Dungeons and Dragons and what it brings to the table. And yeah, Dungeons and Dragons is huge in its breadth and depth, both. There are all kinds of different variations that can come into play. And I think that, yeah, it's been touched on by several people that it was a lot to try and put into the movie. Yeah, I think the idea that captures what happens in this movie is it's sort of like an entry point for mainstream people to understand something about, the world of Dungeons and Dragons. And I do think it does a fine job of that. As someone who's very well versed, I maybe would have liked to go a little bit more in depth on some things and leave like some things out. Go a little bit more in depth on, I don't know, a few different monsters or a set of magical spells or something like that. I don't know. You could have gone deeper. But yeah, I think you would lose some of the appeal to people who don't have that background. So I'm glad that they made this movie the way they did. And Todd, I agree with you. It is probably the best Dungeons and Dragons movie you could make from a commercialized standpoint, and that doesn't make it a good movie.
Yes.
I agree with that sentiment. But I thought it was a fine movie. I thought it was fun. I thought it was funny. And yes, very jokey, very lighthearted. But yeah, overall, I would describe the movie as fun. I had a good time. I'm glad I saw it. And yeah, that's where I'll leave it.
For me, a huge disappointment. I don't know if you'll share this, Matt, because it's an important piece of our history. There was no fearsome chimera.
There was no fearsome chimera. That's true.
It was disappointing for me.
I thought maybe for a second when they were in the maze and that other little creature came out,
Yes.
I was like, maybe it'll be a chimera.
Yeah.
It is not.
Well, let's get down to the important business here.
Yes.
It's been touched on before, but
Yeah,
it
I
was
was gonna say.
definitely going to be the thing
Yep.
that our rating system was. How many fat dragons would you give this movie? 0 being the worst, because then you have no dragons who are obese for you to laugh at and have enjoyment with, I guess. 5 being the best, because then you've got 5 fat dragons and it's a party. So let's start with Matt.
We will, and I will tell you that this movie is going to get 2.8 fat dragons from me out of 5. It was, I think as movies go, it's not the greatest movie, but as an experience and seeing the movie, I think I enjoyed it more than I did not enjoy it, and so it gets an above average rating from me of 2.8 fat dragons out of 5.
Good stuff. Liam?
I think it's a solid 3. It was fun, which was the primary purpose, but there are some things it definitely could have done better. But it was fun, and it did what it was meant to do, which was to entertain people.
Marie?
Well, I like to be entertained, and I was entertained, and I thought it was adorable, which I didn't expect it to be. So I'm going to go with 3.25.
Tim?
I'm kind of in the middle of everybody here. I agree. Fun time. I don't know if I'd see it again, but that's not a knock on it. It's just, like you said, we had a fun time. It was enjoyable, and I would recommend it to people. So I'm going to go at a 2.9.
2.9. I think I am going to land on a straight even 2.0. I think there were things that were fun to watch with it. I think there was a lot crammed into it that was hard for me. But, you know, it is whimsical and enjoyable at parts. So I got to give credit where credit's due. So two fat dragons for me to party with.
There you go. Well, anyone have any final thoughts before we wrap this bad boy up?
We forgot to mention Bradley Cooper's in it.
Oh,
That was
yes.
the famous person we forgot to mention.
Yes.
Oh, that's who that
Thank
was.
you. It was. It took me a minute
kept
to recognize
staring
him.
at him, trying to
Yeah.
figure out who that
Here's
was.
Michelle's
He was the
previous
little guy.
husband, the guy
Yes.
who kicked her out.
Fun little cameo. Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't recognize him at first either.
He was too small for me to...
This will now be the second most popular
Recognize.
tiny CGI character he plays.
Fair enough.
He's Rocket.
He's Rocket.
Oh.
Guardians.
I would hope that
Oh,
every
right.
all mainstream D&D players who over the years have like come out in huge support somewhere were represented in this movie. Maybe we don't know because
Yeah.
they were a monster or something like that, but I don't
I
know.
feel like, isn't Vin Diesel
Yeah.
Diesel's a big.
Huge.
What's his name? And Joe
Joe
Manganiello.
Manganiello or however you say his name.
Yeah.
Henry Cavill.
Oh yeah.
Cavill.
Yeah.
He's Warhammer.
Yeah. He's making a movie on
Oh, nice.
Well, we didn't talk about snacks.
it. No, not at all.
I didn't need any snacks.
No.
I ate all my snacks, which hasn't happened in a while. So
And you drank most of your Pepsi.
I drank all of it. I was out before the movie was over. So
That's never a good sign for you.
not really. Now, rarely ever does the drink last, but
All right.
where it ends in the movie is typically a good indication.
And I was snickering at all the silly jokes, so that means I was having a good time.
Yeah, I wasn't sitting next to you, man. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear any sighs or
Yeah.
anything.
There were a
didn't-
few.
Yeah, I didn't hear that many.
There you go.
Had a few sighs. I thought it was a little long.
I was like, did the movie, Tim, you mentioned this, and I was like, as soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, did it start really dark to anyone? Like,
I thought
Just
it
the
was,
lighting
I
was
thought
off?
the whole movie was dark.
It was very
I
dark.
thought
was
something was wrong
weirdly-
with the projector.
I think it was the projector because I
Okay.
can't imagine it was meant to look that way. Because even the bright scenes were not bright.
Because when me and my girlfriend saw it earlier in the week, it was brighter.
Okay, so I think
so-
we just got the bad
Yeah.
screening. Yeah, because
Yeah,
it just seemed really faded.
It had the weird blue filter like a DCEU movie.
Yeah, which I hate.
take that, DCU.
Take that.
There was a lot of good background jokes that you'd only pick up on if you know D&D really well. Like, there are some background characters where if you saw them, you could recognize them from like the 80s cartoon or from certain expansion modules.
Oh, good for them.
Oh.
So they were
Nice.
Easter eggs for fans.
Yeah, there's just enough lore drops to make it feel like the world of D&D while also not being so overbearing that normal people who don't know anything about D&D were like, what the hell are these guys talking about?
Right.
Gotta,
Hey, don't
gotta,
call me normal.
Gotta drop the Waterdeep and the Baldur's Gate cities.
Cool.
All right.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, where we watched Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. And we gave it an average rating of 2.79 fat dragons out of 5, which is a little bit above average. So we're going to say that our podcast says, see this movie.
I hope you get a brighter screen.
I hope you get a brighter screening. Hope you like it more than Todd. But we think you should see it. And I'm going to see it again on Saturday,
Wow,
taking my kid
there you go.
who really wants to see this movie. So,
Excellent.
so yeah. Thank you all listeners and subscribers of the podcast. We appreciate you. and keep listening, and we will see you next time.
Da 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 da
Da da
da da da.
da da da.